Okay, crimes against the international community now. Crimes committed by individuals and states which are seen as wrong by the international community. There are 4 different types of crimes against the international community. There's genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of aggression, as kind of introduced in 2017. Sorry, I'm going to have a sip of water. Okay. All right. Thomas Lubanga in 2012 was convicted for war crimes, specifically for children soldiers, having children soldiers, and crimes against humanity in the ICC, okay, International Criminal Court. Crimes of aggression recently was defined by the International Criminal Court as the use of force by one state against another, not justified by self-defense. Remember, in human rights, and this is really important as we go into human rights, we define a nation or a country as a state. We refer to them as a state. We don't refer to them as a nation or as a country. We refer to them as a state. So when you hear the use of force by one state against another, we don't mean New South Wales versus Queensland. We mean Australia versus whatever country, okay? Transnational crimes are different. Crimes against the international community is a state or a person committing a crime that's at such a large scale, it's creating a threat to the entire international community. Transnational crimes are different in that they're not necessarily posing a threat to the entire national community. They're more so crimes that happen between states. So here we had Thomas Lubanga. He wasn't in Australia committing any crimes, but he posed threat to Australia because his crimes were of such a large scale. Transnational crimes will be crimes that happen in Australia, in Japan, in China, in USA, in England, wherever, okay? They're happening between countries. These are usually slavery, drug trafficking, people trafficking, drug importation, child abuse images, weaponry trafficking or arms trafficking, money laundering, anything that can be done between states. This has gotten even more complex with the introduction of the internet and widespread internet use and social media, because it's harder to control, because you can talk to anyone at any in any country almost within a few seconds. The 3 main crimes though are drugs, illicit arms trade, and people trafficking. Transnational crimes are dealt with effectively at a domestic level by us, not always by other countries. You're not charged with a transnational crime necessarily. You're not charged with committing, for example, if I'm trafficking drugs in Australia and the USA and Japan, I'm not charged with that trafficking in Japan and the USA. I'm only charged with trafficking in Australia. For example, slave trading is illegal under the Criminal Code Section 270 Commonwealth. It's a domestic offence, while the transnational crime is human trafficking. Okay, so slave trading compared to human trafficking. R versus Wei Tang is a great case to use for that. If I was asked about international crime, I would definitely talk about R versus Wei Tang, 2008. Okay, it was the first slavery conviction in Australia, where she solicited 10 prostitutes from Thailand. Essentially, she told these innocent women in Thailand, you can come to Australia and work for me. I'll give you a house. I'll let you live here, whatever. They were like, all right, great. We'll come to Australia. When they came to Australia, she took their passports and basically forced them to work in a brothel for her without pay or without, correct pay, and without being able to freely move around and leave and all that kind of stuff. So it's considered slavery, which it is. And under that act that we saw before, she was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. We also have R versus Dobby, 2009, which was a Queensland hairdresser where we found Dobby was actually human trafficking people. It was the first case of human trafficking in New South Wales. And here's a media article too, if you're going to use that as evidence. All right. Domestic measures responding to international crime. International crime or transnational crime, just a little side note, hasn't been asked directly almost as long as young offenders, I want to say. Or maybe it was like a year before young offenders. But nonetheless, neither of these have been asked directly. in a long time. So I would be definitely jotting down things. Just a little side note. All right, domestic measures to international crime. We have the Australian Federal Police. They're our number one, okay? They are investigating international crime and they are responding to it. They don't just look within Australia. They team up with other states. Remember, I mean nations, states. They team up to investigate, to go into other countries and help other armed forces, for them to come into our country and help us, to mutually assist one another to tackle international crime. The offender, however, will be prosecuted by domestic courts. So court is another, or common law is another domestic measure. We also have the extradition of offenders where needed. So it's a process whereby one country surrenders a suspect or convicted criminal to another to face criminal charges or sentencing. Okay. Under the extradition agreement, a person who is believed to have committed a crime in Australia can be detained in another country and deported to face legal proceedings. In Australia, extradition is covered by the Extradition Act 1998 Commonwealth. Australia has extradition treaties with about 130 countries. So if you do try to abscond or flee the country, you can just be handed back over to Australia for some countries. Pretty sure, I want to say Chile, we do not have an extradition treaty with, so I think a lot of criminals do end up fleeing there. Australia has ratified and enacted the Rome Statute 2002, which established the ICC. So this is a international measure. So before we look at domestic measures, Australian Federal Police, statutory law and common law. Now we're looking at international measures. The ICC, the International Criminal Court. Essentially, the International Criminal Court tries people who commit crimes against the international community, as we saw before. So it's a measure that's responding to it. It was established by the Rome Statute, as I said. All crimes are listed in the Rome Statute, such as genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression. As I said before, they're all listed in the Rome Statute. The ICC can only prosecute a case where the domestic court can't or is not willing to do so. Yes, a question I get a lot is, why don't we have many cases with Australians at the ICC? The ICC will basically respond to international crime where the country itself doesn't. So we see it responding to crime in a lot of developing nations, because the country oftentimes won't. In Australia, though, we have solid domestic measures which respond to that, which we've seen, right? We don't really need the ICC. So an example of a tribunal that has been set up to respond to international crime is for the former Yugoslavia, which was established by the UN Security Council in 1993 via the Resolution 827. The role was to prosecute individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide committed during the Yugoslavia conflict in 1990s. And then we also have another one for Rwanda that happened in 1994 under Resolution 955. However, both of them highly unsuccessful, very costly, not great international measures. Okay, so if you want to talk about the international criminal tribunals that have been set up to try people who have committed crimes against the international community, that's definitely something to talk about, okay? Both of these have spent billions of dollars and have actually prosecuted and convicted, right, because we want convictions, convicted very little people for how much money they've spent. The International Criminal Court was set up by the Rome Statute, as I said. It has jurisdiction to prosecute individuals who commit all those crimes. It is a court of last resort, okay? As I said, it's not trying to take over the power of states and come into Australia and say, oh, someone, was convicted of slavery. We'll try them. Don't worry about Australia. We'll do it ourselves. There, if a country doesn't do it themselves. Can only prosecute cases when states are not willing to. The main responsibility is to investigate and prosecute these international crimes that lie within member states to the UN. The ICC can only exercise jurisdiction where the accused is a national of a member state of the treaty. Okay, the alleged crime occurred in the territory of a member state. The situation is referred to the ICC by the UN Security Council. Where the ICC convicts an individual, it can impose a sentence of up to life imprisonment, not the death penalty. The court may order a fine or a forfeiture of assets and imprisonment. It's effective for victims, okay? It's usually not just one victim because we're talking about things like genocide here. As it presents their views and observations before the court, there's some form of reparation for the suffering that's occurred. There's a balance between retributive and restorative justice, which enables the ICC to bring criminals to justice and help victims rebuild their lives. All right.